Okay, well, welcome. This is one in a series of webinars now that we've been running to help people write submissions to government processes. And this one is all about the Australian government's renewal of the Australian Animal Welfare Strategy. So welcome everybody to our workshop. Presenting today, it's me, Bidda Jones. I'm one of the co-founders of the Australian Alliance for Animals, and co-presenting is Jed Goodfellow, my fellow co-founder. Hi, Jed. So yeah, we're very happy to be here and to run you through this whole process. Before we start, I would like to just recognise that we are meeting on Aboriginal land and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the lands throughout Australia that we're meeting on, and our respects to the enduring connections of the traditional owners to land, sea and community. This new platform is new to us and it's new to you. So just want to explain how you ask a question during the webinar. You've probably already, some of you, seen the chat function, but if you want to actually ask a question as opposed to just say hi, then click on the question mark in the speech bubble icon and type in your question. You can also verbally ask a question and click on the smiley face to raise your hand or say you need help. And during the gap in presentations where we're asking for questions, you'll be able to do that as well. So you can verbally ask or you can type your questions in. So what are we doing today? What are we here for? The Australian Animal Welfare Strategy is something that has existed for some time, but it's been paused since I've got the date suddenly gone out of my head, since 2014. And this whole process is about renewing that strategy. So what we'll be doing in the webinar is just running through an overview of the consultation and submission process. We'll be explaining the key points that you can make in your submission. We'll be talking about how to use the submission copilot, and we'll be talking about how to lodge your submission. So hopefully by the end of the workshop, you will know all about the Australian government's proposal to renew the Australian Animal Welfare Strategy. You'll understand those key points for your submission, and you'll know how to craft your own response with help from our online tool, the Submission Copilot. And you'll either, by the end of this webinar, have lodged your submission, or you'll have a clear plan of action for doing that by 4 p.m. on the 31st of May. That's the final deadline for all submissions to this process. So what's the process been so far? The Australian Animal Welfare Strategy, or AAWS, you'll hear Jed and me referring to it as AAWS throughout this, was first endorsed in 2004 by the federal, state and territory ministers. That's a process that I was aware of at the time. I think Jed and I have both been around for most of the duration that the AAWS has been in existence. And it was a successful strategy in raising the profile of animal welfare policy and in improving collaboration between stakeholders, government, industry, animal welfare groups as well. It ran for 10 years until the Abbott government ceased its funding in 2014. And the image on the right here is the actual strategy and implementation plan from that era. So ahead of the 2022 federal election, the Australian Labor Party committed to re-establish the AAWS. We think that we can't claim full credit for that, but certainly the decision that they made to do that was certainly helped in part by the scorecard campaign that the Alliance for Animals ran ahead of that federal election. That is what gave Labor a tick for one of their commitments in our scorecard. And in the 2023 federal budget, the government introduced $5 million over 4 years to renew the oars. So they have put some funding behind it, not enough, but some. What's happening now is that the Federal Department of Agriculture is seeking input to help shape the renewed strategy. So on the government's Have Your Say website, they put out a discussion paper. That discussion paper asks a series of questions, so 8 questions to help guide your response. And our submission guide helps provide answers to each of those questions. What you'll see on the right-hand side, the timeline here, so this process started in March. The survey closes. There's a survey that you can complete, but you don't have to. You can do submissions. The survey closes on the 20th of May. The submissions close on the 31st of May, 2024. But then it says the final strategy won't be published until mid-2027. And that entire time is all currently supposed to be about strategy development, not actual implementation of the strategy. And that's one of the issues that we want to tackle in the submissions. So that's the explanation of the process. I'm now going to hand over to Jed to talk through the actual submission points that we'd like you to make. Thanks, Jed.
Great, thanks very much, Bidda, and hello everybody. Fantastic to see so many people tuning in tonight, and I think that is reflective to some extent of the significance of this review process, because it is really a very important one. Having national coordination, national leadership is extremely important, especially when you're dealing with a federal system of government that we have. Next slide, Bidda. So I'm just going to take you through some of the key points we're making in our submission. And these points are also, we've fed them into the submissions copilot as well. So most of the information I address today will be already built into that submission copilot, but you'll be able to feed in further points that you wish to make as well as you go through. But Bidda will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So we always think it's really helpful at the beginning of submissions to outline the significance of that review process. So as Bidda's already mentioned, we've had over 10 years of stagnation in animal welfare policy and standards development, courtesy of the previous government essentially stripping everything to do with animal welfare at the federal level out of the Department of Agriculture and defunding the Australian Animal Welfare Strategy. So it's great to see that it is on foot and we're creating a new one. And really, the opportunity is to harness the power of cooperative federalism. Our federal system of government also poses some challenges, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it also poses some opportunities as well. So highlighting that at the beginning of your submission is a good point to make as well. Of course, that requires the commitment of all Australian governments to ensure that this actually works. While this is an initiative of the federal government and the Federal Department of Agriculture, it's not worth the paper it's written on unless the state and territory governments are also there supporting the national strategy. So therein lies both the risk but also the opportunity. And it's really important that state and territory governments and federal government all take a modern approach to ensuring the oars is focused in the right way. So recognising the sentience of animals and the intrinsic value of animals being a core focus and a core reason for the very creation of the strategy, a core reason for the creation of our national system for animal welfare. Emphasising that within the oars is really important. Of course, also highlighting the instrumental benefits of animal welfare and treating animals well is important, and I'm sure the Department of Agriculture at the federal and state level will do that. But it's really important that those instrumental benefits, and by the instrumental benefits, I mean things like animal welfare, facilitating trade and market access or community confidence in animal industries and government and so forth, those other benefits of protecting animals well, They're important, but they shouldn't be the central focus of an animal welfare strategy. The central focus really needs to be about highlighting the fact that animal welfare matters because it matters to the animals. Sentience is the reason that animal welfare matters, and we need to get that focus right in the strategy. And finally, in the preliminary section of the strategy, it would be great, of your submissions, it would be great also to highlight, as Bidda mentioned, the really long time frame and the fact that your expectation is that this would be completed prior to 2027. I mean, the fact that we're looking at doing every chapter of the oars in a linear fashion as opposed to doing, some in parallel, I think is probably a reflection of the low level of funding that's been dedicated to the development of oars. So $5 million might sound like a lot, but over 4 years, it's really not much funding at all. And the Australian government does need to commit more funding. So if you can make that point in your submission as well, I think that would be worthwhile. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Bidda. So the first question that the discussion paper asks is around the vision of the oars, and it proposes this particular vision to establish an animal welfare system that brings stakeholders together, identifies national priorities with actions and outcomes, and demonstrates to the public and international partners that Australia values the welfare of animals. And it asks whether or not this reflects everything you feel an oars should aim to achieve. So our view on this is that this isn't a very well-drafted vision statement, that it really is more of a mission statement in the sense that it's talking about what the oars is seeking to do as opposed to the future that it is seeking to create. As a vision statement generally is more about outlining an inspirational, aspirational future state of affairs that you want to contribute to. Also, and probably even more importantly, it doesn't actually include a reference to improved outcomes for animals. And of course, that should really be the central objective of the oars of a national strategy, is securing outcomes on the ground for animals. So the vision statement proposed, it talks about setting up a system, getting stakeholders together, identifying priorities, and demonstrating to the public and trade partners that we value animals, but it doesn't actually reference improving welfare outcomes on the ground. So we think that's a bit of an omission, and that needs to change. And as you can see there, that the previous 2008 version of the oars, we thought they probably did a better job at that stage with the vision statement. At least it's a basic one, but at least it references promoting and protecting animal welfare, which really should go without saying that is part of the vision of a national animal welfare strategy. So making comments around that, I think, would be valuable, and that's also points to that aim built into the submissions app. Next slide, thanks, Bidda. In terms of the work stream, so this is the second question within the discussion paper. It sets out 6 different work streams, work priorities for the oars framework, and we think they get this right. This is quite comprehensive, and it does, in our view, address some of the key priority areas of work under a national strategy. And in the submissions app, I won't go through each of these, but we include a few key points in terms of our expectations around what these different work streams would aim to achieve and how they would operate. But when it comes to leadership, independence in that leadership, really important. Also, just to comment on the standards and implementation, of course, that will be an absolutely critical part of a national animal welfare strategy, is the framework for establishing national standards that are intended to be adopted under state and territory law. There is a parallel review going on at the moment relating to our national standards framework. That is a review that is more discrete in nature, and it's seeking targeted stakeholder input at the moment, and that will build into the overall oars once the oars is set up. But it is good to see that at least some work is being done right now today on reviewing that national standards framework, so that we don't have to wait until 2027 to see the benefits of that, because we do have a backlog of national standards that need to be developed. But yeah, there will be more information on each of those work streams in the submissions app and in our final submission. Next slide, thanks, Bidda. In addition to the work streams, the discussion paper also asks for input around what other factors may affect all animal sectors. So in the discussion paper, they talk about 6 different animal sector groups, and that includes livestock and production animals, aquatic animals, wild animals, companion animals, animals used in work, sport and recreation, and animals used in research and teaching. But for all of those areas of animal use and interaction, there are certain factors that will impact animals and human beings, of course, in all of those areas. And the discussion paper is asking for your feedback on what those factors may be. So we've identified 4 here that we provide a little bit more information on in the submissions app, but also a lot more information in our own submission. But we feel that those are the key areas: climate change, of course, biosecurity and the risk of disease outbreaks, long-term trends in public attitudes, beliefs and values towards animals, and of course AI, the ubiquitous AI that is going to affect every part of our lives in the future, and it could have profoundly positive or negative impacts upon animals. And it's extremely important that the governance arrangements that are set up for AI and the policies developed for climate change mitigation and adaptation, biosecurity, prevention of disease outbreaks, all factor in animal welfare into those strategies and policies. So having the AAWS focus also on those issues, perhaps through setting up a cross-sectoral issues group or working group, would be a good way to go about doing that, providing that independent, expert-based advice to different government entities that are dealing with all of those issues to make sure animal welfare is considered. Next slide, thanks, Bidda. And the next question relates to the major challenges that our national animal welfare system faces. And the discussion paper highlights a number of proposed challenges. We think pretty much all of those challenges that are highlighted in the discussion paper can essentially fall under 2 key challenges. One being the lack of independent oversight under current governance arrangements. At the moment, as many of you would know, we delegate animal welfare policy, regulatory responsibilities largely to departments of agriculture and ministries for agriculture. So, and even the AAWS itself will come under the remit of AGSOC, the Agriculture Senior Officials Committee, which is made up of senior public servants within departments of agriculture in the states and territories and at the federal level. And finally, the overarching decision-making body is the Agriculture Ministers Meeting, or AMM. And that is a forum where state, territory, federal agriculture ministers get together to decide major policy decisions on agriculture, and animal welfare falls under their remit. And we think that's problematic because these institutions do have competing priorities. Animal welfare reforms can often impact productivity goals. And when increasing the gross value of production for livestock industries is a real key measure of the performance of departments of agriculture and ministries, when a proposal to improve animal welfare, whether it be through phasing out battery cages or crates for sow stalls, or whether it be through increasing space allowances or reducing growth rates for animals that have been selectively bred for high growth, or whether it be through requiring pain relief for painful husbandry practices, all of these reforms involve some degree of additional input costs to the system. So they do conflict to some extent with industry productivity goals, unless further efficiencies can be found in other areas to offset those productivity losses. So there's a fundamental tension there, and that's why we firmly believe animal welfare in the long term needs to be moved out of agriculture portfolios and we need to have more independent governance arrangements for animal welfare that don't come up against those competing priorities. This would also be, this is also an issue for community confidence in the system, because we do see that having agriculture institutions responsible for animal welfare is contrary to community expectations. We commissioned Behaviour Works Australia last year to survey Australian community views on the way animal welfare policy is developed and governed. 86% of Australians believe that the final decision on animal welfare policies should be made by an independent and impartial authority. 68% believe that should be some kind of animal welfare commission or agency, while only 22% felt that the current arrangements with departments of agriculture was an appropriate way to govern animal welfare policy. So, and further research commissioned by the Department of Agriculture itself back in 2018, the Future Eye report, also found similar concerns. In focus groups around the country, people raised concerns about having the same body responsible for the promotion of agriculture also being the body in charge of animal welfare. So it is also something that that does affect community confidence in the animal welfare system when we have those governance arrangements. The other major challenge, of course, is the federated system that we have. And one of the key risks there is, of course, that you can have one jurisdiction, one state government or territory government that decides not to follow the national process, or it decides to pull out of implementing a nationally agreed standard. Then all of a sudden it can undermine the entire national process, and we can't achieve national consistency. So these issues are inherent and common to all federated systems of government. Working with different independent state agencies is a difficult process, but there are means and strategies that can be employed to mitigate some of those risks, which we'll talk about in the next section. Thanks, Bidda. So in terms of the opportunities, so this is the last section of the discussion paper, asking people what are the major opportunities for Australia's animal welfare system moving into the future. Probably won't surprise you to see that one of the major opportunities that we believe that we should be pursuing is to establish more independent forms of governance for animal welfare, including through the establishment of a National Commission for Animal Welfare. Now, of course, that is not a recommendation that's going to come out of this particular review and this process, because it's all about just developing a strategy. But nevertheless, we feel that it is still important to highlight both the nature of the challenge, being the conflicting priorities built into the governance arrangements, the current governance arrangements, and what a potential solution to that is. And this is very well supported now by independent commissions. The Productivity Commission itself has recommended that Australia establish a National Commission for Animal Welfare to lead the states and territories on the development of national standards, to become a centre for animal welfare policy excellence, to streamline those processes, to ensure national consistency, to hold the states to account on implementation timeframes, and to provide an independent source of expert advice to government. So it ticks many boxes, and indeed there would be many benefits, of course, to animal-based industries and businesses as well, in terms of increasing levels of certainty, keeping ahead of social licence issues, etc. And that is why the Productivity Commission felt that it was very good policy. And this has recently also been reinforced by a more recent review in 2022. The Department of Agriculture commissioned an independent review of the poultry welfare panel that was set up to finalise the national poultry standards. And that review, while it didn't recommend the establishment of a National Animal Welfare Authority, it dedicated a section of the report to that, and highlighted how it would address many of the current deficiencies in the system. So it was in my view, reading between the lines, it was an implicit endorsement of the policy proposal of setting up an independent national animal welfare body. Of course, as I mentioned, look, we might not get that recommendation in this review, but highlighting the need for more independent arrangements within the governance of the national animal welfare system is something that would be really valuable for this process, so that the policy officers reviewing the public submissions can at least think about the ways in which they may be able to address those concerns and meet similar outcomes through different options. And including, setting up an independent national expert-based advisory committee to oversee the implementation of the AAWS. It's not going to solve all of the issues, because you'll still have agriculture ministers being in control, essentially, of the major policy decisions. But it would nevertheless be a very welcomed improvement on the current system, where we don't have that independent expert-based advice coming through. Again, the submissions app will have further information about those issues. So we think they're the major opportunities. They would also address some of those issues to do with the federated system of government that we have. Thanks, Bidda. And so just to sum up there, so if we can get these key messages out, including, as I mentioned, that this review is of profound significance for the welfare of animals in Australia, those expectations around timeline and funding, more funding, shorter timeframe, the focus of the AAWS being about recognising the sentience of animals and their intrinsic value, that being the core basis of the strategy, and the instrumental benefits being essentially incidental to that core basis, not the central theme of the strategy, and ensuring that it includes improved outcomes for animals as a central objective of the strategy, highlighting those conflicting priorities of the current governance arrangements and calling for more independence in governance and the processes for setting national standards. If we can get those key messages through within your submissions, I think that's going to be a very valuable contribution to the review. Thanks, Bidda.
Okay, thank you, Jed. I'm just going to stop sharing, and we can move to answering some of the questions that have come in. And thank you, Nadia, for posting these for us. So, yeah, the first question here is, will the AAWS help to ensure the existing laws in the Animal Welfare Act revised or enacted? So just to be clear, that the Animal Welfare Acts are state and territory based. This is a strategy that is very top level in terms of helping to improve the profile of animal welfare and the coordination between different states and territories in terms of animal welfare policy. But in terms of actually enforcing legislation, that really is something that goes to the state and territory level. Jed, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that's all correct. However, there is a work stream, as you would have seen in one of the previous slides, that is about reporting and compliance. And so while the AAWS and the federal government won't be able to enforce the laws in the state jurisdictions, a very helpful contribution to enforcement would be publicly reporting on enforcement activities and statistics. At the moment, we really don't know how much compliance work is undertaken within different animal industries. We don't know how many routine inspections are undertaken, how many compliance notices are issued, how many prosecutions. Some state governments report prosecutions, others don't. So if the AAWS is able to set up a work stream that looks at publicly reporting on compliance activities, that would encourage the application. I think that would encourage the application of the current laws that are on the books today. If a state is shown to not have a very active compliance monitoring regime, then relative to other states and territories, then that could be a source of embarrassment for that particular government, and more scrutiny and pressure could be placed upon them to invest more in compliance monitoring activities and enforcement activities.
Yeah, Thanks, Jed. While we're waiting for another question to come up, I noted, I was just going to ask this one. Can you do both the survey and the submission? Yes. So on the Have Your Say website, which we'll talk about in a minute, there's the option to complete a survey and or upload a submission. So you can do both, but you don't have to do the survey. Our focus here is on creating submissions, because then we've got control over, and you've got control over the information that you submit, as opposed to just answering questions. So there's also a longer deadline on the submission process, because that is open until the end of May, whereas the survey is only open until the 21st of May. We have another question. There were a couple of questions about the $5 million and what they're going to spend the money on. So to be clear, we don't exactly know, because that hasn't been sort of costed out, but it appears that the intention is that the $5 million will be spent on the development of the strategy as opposed to the implementation of it. So a significant amount of that will probably go towards the employment of the staff at the Department of Agriculture who are involved in that development process. I don't think we know a great deal more, but I'll just hand over to Jed in case he has any ideas.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. The budget papers didn't go into any real detail there. It was really, our understanding is it was to establish the branch within the Department of Agriculture that would be leading the development of the strategy. So it does require staff resources, of course, but again, it needs to be more funding to ensure that they can do more at the same time, as opposed to a one step at a time sort of lineal approach that will take could take longer than 2027. So we do need more resources.
Yeah, absolutely. When will the Labor government honour its election promise to ban live export, and is this included in the submission? So the second part of that, no, because this is about an overall strategy for states and territories and the way that they will shape animal welfare policy going forward. So it is separate to the Labor government's election promise. We very much hope that they will make some kind of public announcement about this in the next few weeks. We have been hoping that for some time. It's over 6 months since the independent panel handed over its review, and we've been waiting since then to hear the government's response. So we feel everybody's pain about this. Believe me, we share it, and we're doing a lot to try and push the government to actually making an announcement. I mean, when I say we, that's the AllianceForAnimals members and the broader End Live Sheep Export group that we help coordinate, which includes about 15 different animal welfare organisations around the country and also in New Zealand. So will this cover all animals across the whole of Australia? Jed, I'll pass to you to talk about the scope of the strategy.
Yeah, so the idea is to cover all animals. It's not just going to be livestock and production animals. As I mentioned earlier, there are 6 animal sectors that have been identified, and they're the same 6 animal groupings that were in the previous ORs as well. Now, there will be some species of animals that might fall outside of those 6 groupings, but I think they capture the vast majority of the animals that we use and interact with. So that certainly is the intention.
Yeah. Okay, so another question about, should animal welfare be part of planning regulations too? Infrastructure for intensive animal agriculture is not even considered. Absolutely, and perhaps this is something that you could raise in a submission as part of the sort of cross-sectoral issues, because obviously that bringing animal welfare into planning regulations involves reaching out beyond departments of agriculture. So that's certainly something that you could add to your submission. I'm conscious of the time, and we may be able to come back to some more questions a little bit later. But there's just one other question that I wanted to respond to that's in the chat in terms of a little bit of cynicism from some of you out there about, why should I write a submission to this process? Will anything change? And I guess our view is that if we don't write submissions, nothing will change. So we're really keen on trying to encourage as many people to do this as possible. And the whole idea about this workshop and the process that we're running is to make it as easy as possible for you to write a submission that really addresses the points that we're putting forward. We feel that there will, of course, be stakeholders across the spectrum putting submissions into this process, and agricultural industries will be pressing very hard for their interests to be pushed to the head of the queue. We need to make sure that those people that really have animal interests at heart are heard loudly, and that there are many submissions that are received that really put animals at the center of this strategy to make sure that improved animal welfare is what this strategy is all about, not maintaining the status quo or just creating some kind of system where people talk to each other but don't do anything. So, that really is in our hands in terms of the sorts of submissions that you can write. And we think it's really important that you do put in a submission to this process. So I'm going to just switch back into the presentation for a moment. Just bear with me while I do that. And just to run through very briefly what the process is from here. So you'll see in the top of your screen, or I think you can see this. This is the trouble with using a new system. And there will be a link to the submission copilot, but if you should be able to see that, but you don't need to jump there just yet. But fine if you do. So the submission process here from here on is, create your submission using our copilot tool, personalize it, and then upload it to the Have Your Say website. So there's 3 steps to go through from here. When you have completed the copilot process, which is I'm going to take you to next, there's also 3 steps to go through on the AAWS renewal stage. So you just have to go to that page. There's a submission upload button that you can press on that page. When you press that, you'll be asked a few questions, just things like your name and a few other questions about whether you have any particular interest in animal welfare. And then you can just upload a document. So that stage is pretty simple. For those of you that were at our last workshop, it's a lot easier than the Victorian government site. So that's really good. You don't have to register with this site. You can just go there and upload your submission. So okay, now we're going to move to the submission copilot. So this is, for those of you that have used it before, you'll recognize some of this again, although this process is tweaked slightly because it's a slightly different kind of submission. We just like to thank Casey Clifton at Alive AI again for his work on this. He's just dedicated a whole lot of time to help set this up, and every time we do a new submission there's more work to be done, and we're really, really grateful for his support. So there's a QR code there that you can use to jump to the submission copilot. You can also click on it on the link, but I will now just talk you through that process as well. So just change my screen sharing again. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is the landing page for the submission copilot. You can read some of the background to the copilot itself. But the main thing to notice here is that across the top, there are 6 different stages to creating your submission. So I'm going to go to Select Project. And there you can see that there's 2 projects currently running on the Copilot. There's one about the parliamentary inquiry into artificial intelligence. But for today's workshop, we're going to choose the second option, which is the AAWS renewal. The Read More button that you can see, that would take you to the Have Your Say website, so you can read more about the actual process itself, download the discussion paper, and go through the different questions. But if you just click on the actual project and I click there, that will take us through to the next stage, which is the instructions. I'm not going to talk through all of these. You'll be able to read through these when you actually go into the Copilot and go through the process yourself. But these are some of the information that you've already heard from Jed and myself during this workshop, and then some information about how you create your submission, which I'm just going to talk you through. So once you've read that information, you can hit next, or you can just click on the bar at the top. I'm going to go to select arguments. So what we've set out on this page are some general comments. So that's equivalent to the first information that Jed was talking about when he was talking about the overall issues that we feel are raised by the animal welfare strategy renewal, and some of the sort of overarching points that we think need to be made there. And then the rest of the arguments here go through the different questions that are raised in the discussion paper. So when you go through this, what you're going to be doing is picking the arguments that resonate the most with you. So in each section, each group, there are 1 to 5 different paragraphs of information that you can include in your submission. So the way you're going to pick those is to just click on them. So you'll see that's just turned into shaded text. So I'm going to pick that first one. I'm going to pick this third one. Now, our advice is don't pick all of the arguments in each group, because the submission that is generated will actually not be as detailed as if you pick 1, 2, or 3 of these arguments. So generally speaking, I think the advice is to pick the two arguments that resonate the most with you. If you really feel that you need to pick more than that, pick 3, but don't pick all of them. So I've picked those 2 in the general comments. Now I'm going to scroll down to the first question. I think it's important that you answer all of the questions. So I'm going to pick text going all the way down through these arguments. I'm going to pick this first point. I'm going to pick the second point for question 1. Obviously, if you were doing this yourself, you'd be spending a little bit more time reading the arguments and considering which ones you're going to choose. Question 2. So question 2 is about the work stream. So I'm going to definitely say that I think all the work streams are important, but I'm just going to focus on the standards and implementation work stream, because I think that's the most important one. I think it's really important that I make a comment about that. I'm going to go down to question 3. These are the shared factors affecting animal welfare across different animal groups, so things that are going to affect all animals. I think climate change is really important to highlight there, and I'm also going to talk about the importance of the impacts of artificial intelligence. So questions 4 and 5 are about the challenges, as Jed has talked about, the challenges facing Australia's animal welfare system. So I'm going to go with the first one, which is the biggest challenge being lack of independent governance. I also think it's important that we talk about community expectations and what the public wants. So I'm going to pick this third argument for that answer. And then finally, questions 6 and 7, they're about the opportunities for Australia's animal welfare system. So I'm going to talk about I'm going to pick this first one, which is about the establishment of National Animal Welfare Commission. And I also think that there's some evidence here about what that would do that I'd like to include. So I'm going to pick that argument. Okay, so I've gone through now and I've picked 2 arguments from each of the questions and also 2 arguments to make in the general comments. So I'm going to click next. And that's where you have the opportunity to put in some personal information, or also you can put in any other comments that you would like to add. So bearing in mind, you can always add to the submission at the end of the process anyway, because you're going to be downloading a document. But if you want to just have that straight put into the submission that's generated, you can pop it in here. So as in the best interest of live broadcasting, here's one I prepared earlier. So I've already put in a little bit about me. You don't have to put your name in here. So if you're at all nervous about using artificial intelligence, and this is linked to ChatGPT, so if you're nervous about putting your name in there, you don't have to. You can just add it to the letter at the end. And I've put in something that I think is really important. I'd like to make sure is emphasized at the end of my submission is the need for the strategy to recognize animal sentience. So I've put that in there. Then I'm going to hit next. And if I was starting this from scratch, I would have to generate some new text here, but I'm not. So I've already prepared this earlier. But if you don't like what the text is that has been created, then you could hit regenerate, and that would regenerate it as well. It takes about 3 minutes, or can take up to 3 minutes for the AI to generate your submission. So just hang in there. There's nothing wrong. You'll see that there's a wheel spinning as that happens. And it will eventually generate the submission. So you'll see that the submissions for this process are organized in terms of the general comments and then the questions. And so the question text will appear in your final submission, hopefully just like this. And then question 8, that's the additional information that I added at the end, which is the last question of the discussion paper. Have you got anything else to add? So that's my draft submission. Now, I'm going to generate a Google Doc and paste that in. And so I would be clicking on this Create Doc button to do that. Your alternative is just to copy the text, and you can copy that straight into a Word document if you prefer to use Word. I'm going to go to the document I already prepared. So I created this from a previous generation of a submission. Something I wanted to emphasize here is the important aspect of personalizing your submission once it's been generated. So this is really important for a number of reasons. You want to make sure that the submission that has been generated actually reflects your views. So it's really important to read through it and be comfortable with that. You also want to make sure that the writing style matches your personal style. So there's often going to be clunky words in here. AI doesn't write them in a way that will naturally reflect your writing style. So I've just highlighted a couple of things here. So for example, it doesn't know who the letter is to. So it's just decided to put in the acronym for the Department of Agriculture. I might change that to just talk to the people involved with the strategy itself. So I might change that to the Australian Animal Welfare Strategy Renewal Team. I also, when I have a look at this, the end of the first paragraph, I request that you consider my submission earnestly. I don't think earnestly is a word I would normally use, so I'm going to change that into something that would be more reflective of my normal language. And then, like under general comments, it's come up with, for over a decade, Australia has navigated without a national direction on animal welfare. I think that sounds a bit weird. I think I might just say that Australia has lacked a national direction in animal welfare. So that's the kind of thing where you just look at it and you think, meh, that's not really what I would say. And so do take your time to get this right. And of course, if you're reading now the submission that's been generated for you and there are points that you think haven't been haven't been included. For example, in Jed's summary slide, he presented a number of different points. If you don't feel all of those are in there, feel free to add them in. So this is a tool to help you generate submissions, but it doesn't necessarily include everything that you want to say. So it's really important that you take the time to use it to make the submission work for you. So I will just end sharing my screen. I think I've gone through everything. Now to take any questions about either the process or going back to the issues that you may have before we wrap up. So if I was to share something about Ordinary, also share the submission copilot to assist others. Yes, you can. Ideally, we would like you to share the recording of this webinar so that people can actually go through the process of hearing about the different issues that we are and the arguments and why we think those are the important things to make in the submission. When you leave the webinar, there will be a thank you page, and there will be a page on our website which provides those links. I think we're also going to be able to put our slide set up there as well, so as a PDF. So all of the tools will be there for people to be able to use the submission copilot in an informed way. So yes, you may share it, but I think the best thing to do would be to share the page from our website that includes all of that information. What are the likely numbers needed to get our requests considered? How do they decide which recommendations to endorse? Is it the balance of numbers requesting it? That's a really good question, Annie. And the truth is, when processes like this are considered at the other end, those people involved, they will take the weight of a particular recommendation. They will consider that in making their decisions, but obviously there's going to be a whole lot of different factors that will be fed into this process. We really want to make sure that there is a strong voice heard about the need for independence in decision making in animal welfare, and our feeling is that this process will be one of those things that will push it along further. We've already seen some movement in some states in terms of considering this, and we see, I think if we're sort of looking at that being a shift over time across Australia, we are certainly on that journey. And we've still got some way to go, but we're certainly on that journey. Jed, did you want to add to that?
I think that addresses everything there. And there's, just to highlight, there's an issue with your mic. You might have seen the comments there, but I know we're about to finish anyway. So.
Okay, apologies for that. I'm not sure what's happening there. Okay. All right. Okay, another Another question, or is presumably is dependent upon Labour remaining in office or government. How are we approaching the possibility that there's a change in government as there would likely not be the same mindset? Well, that's probably something to thread with you, Jen, in terms of our approach to the next election and how we might be campaigning on that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's something we're very mindful of, ensuring that there is bipartisan support where we can get it for animal welfare reforms and policies. And of course, we saw the consequences of it back in 2014 when the Abbott government abolished funding for the strategy. So there's no guarantees, of course, that this will be sustained through different governments, but we can certainly do the work with the opposition to try and get support for maintaining the strategy while they're in opposition. I think it's a approach to do that while they're not in power. But their priorities once they're in power, of course, is something that's fairly out of our hands. However, the more support that is conveyed for maintaining the strategy and its programs, the better chances of maintaining governments.
Okay, I think, Jed, it might be good if you mute while I wrap up. That seems to be some of the problem, and you've done that. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We are now going to wrap up. So there will be further information available on our website, and we'll be communicating that to people who have attended. There is a short survey on your screen right now for you to complete before you go. If you could do that, that would be brilliant, because we will be using this to help improve this process in the future. I'm really grateful that you could be here, and yes, please share the link with others. I know we had about 180 people register for this webinar, and we've had about 85 attending live, so there'll be a lot more who'll be able to look at that recording afterwards. But it's been really great questions. Thank you, and good luck with your submissions. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.